Welcome to our online discussion. I'm Elham from the NCRI Women's Committee, and today we are joined with our special guests, who I'll introduce after the introduction. I'll ask them to introduce themselves, but before we start the online conference today, which we will be focusing on the situation of women's rights violations in Iran. As part of this discussion, we have decided to expand on the 10-point plan drafted by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi on women's rights of tomorrow's Iran and compare it to the misogynist laws of the Iranian regime, where women are the first victims of this religious dictatorship which has been ruling Iran for the last 37 years. Now, we are joined with two special guests. I wanted to ask you to introduce yourself. We have Dr. Ranjana Kumari from India and also Mrs. Culi from Albania. Dr. Kumari, please introduce yourself.
I am Ranjana Kumari from India. I am Director for Center for Social Research in Delhi. I'm a women's rights activist, and also I have served at the United Nations as gender advisor in the International Labour Office of Geneva. I have a long experience of writing about women. I have done 9 books. Which are on various aspects of lives of women, especially focusing on violence against women. I have been supportive of the struggle for independence and democratic rights of women of Iran, and also very much participated in the conferences where I have got opportunity to discuss with other sisters from countries which are democratic countries to draw their attention towards the issues that are very, very important for Iranian women. And also I have gone through very carefully the 10-point agenda of Madam Maryam Rajavi, and then I think it's something which is very substantive and which really focuses on democratic rights and restoration of democratic rights to women of Iran.
Thank you. And Mrs. Culi, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Elham, and thank you for this conference. And good evening, Mrs. Kumari, Dr. Kumari. And I also am an activist on women issues. I am the president of Women's Forum for Albania. And in these 25 years after the change of the regime from dictatorship, I have worked too much on gender issues, on rights of women, against violence on women, and many other issues related to the women field. I have written also many books on the issue, and also I am a writer, artistic, and I have written many novels where, of course, the themes, the subjects of women are important. I am a journalist also, and I work actually in one of the main TV stations in Albania, where I work on women issues, culture, books, etc. And I have been involved in politics. I have been one mandate as an MP of the parliament, and I was in the Commission of Social Issues. And I have looked very carefully to the 10 points of Mrs. Rajavi, and I think there is so much to discuss on them.
Okay, thank you very much to both of you for joining us today. I'm sure your messages and your insights will be conveyed to the strong women of Iran who are following us today, and also will be able to, send your messages to them. As I mentioned in the start, we'll be speaking about the situation of women in Iran under the rule of the regime in Iran, where Iranian women have suffered the most. They have and they are the prime victims of this regime, and therefore they're the first ones to speak about regime change and have always been in the front line for freedom and democracy in Iran. As we witnessed in our history, in Iran's history, as soon as Khomeini took power, the first laws and the rules that were instated in his constitution were laws against women, particularly the compulsory veiling and the dress code. Right after, a few months after he took power, there was this law that was instated where women were stripped of their rights. For example, the women had no choice. They were forced to abide by this law. Other laws also came into power. For example, the legal age of, for girls was 18. After Khomeini came to power, it became 13. And then in the recent years, it has dropped to 9. Also, for example, women have been restricted in political leadership. They're forbidden to become presidents, they're forbidden to become judges, and this is part of the constitution. And on the international arena, for example, the Iranian regime has not signed international conventions, safeguarding the rights of women, for example, the CEDAW. It's one of the handful countries, one of the countries, yes, that have not signed the convention. And so this is why violence against women is institutionalized. So today we have the opportunity to speak about the fundamental rights of women, and I wanted to start with the 10-point plan that both of you have mentioned, which Mrs. Rajavi has written. The first point is fundamental freedoms and rights, and among this, the first point states that women shall have the equal right to enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Discrimination against women must be abolished in all forms. And, for example, women should have equal rights to travel, to freely choose, their clothing, have the right to leave the country, to obtain foreign citizenship. These are among the rights of the first point. Now, Ms. Culi, I wanted to ask you about what your opinion about this, because I know you've been working for many years on women's rights issues in your own country, and I wanted to ask you, why is it important? What is the need to have fundamental freedoms, and what has been taken away from Iranian women? What do you know?
Oh, yes, thank you for the question. In all the countries, all the discriminatory regimes, dictatorship regimes, they have, as the first thing that they do is to oppress the women.
Right.
Because in this way, we have all the world, all the human society has a long history of discrimination, but in the last century there have been many changes in many countries, and the fundamental rights, the CEDAW Convention of United Nations is a very important instrument for societies, for women, and for the governments that want to have a real democratic society. Because I have been in touch with you and from some years now, so I am informed of the women's situation in Iran, and really it is a very quite important work that you are doing to change the situation and even the women inside the country. Yes, so I think your fight for social rights and human rights is very important. It is not very easy. There are only in '96 when it was in Beijing conference, it was said in a very clear form that women's rights are human rights. Exactly. Because not always that thing was mentioned.
Right. For example, I'll just add to that. For example, the fundamental rights that we are talking about in the first point that Mrs. Rajavi has said. For example, we're talking about discrimination against women. This is like the most fundamental thing. The Iranian regime has not signed the CEDAW, whereas Dr. Kumari, you could explain that the planet is moving towards a 50-50 plan, but where is the Iranian regime? Or for example, women are not allowed to enter sports stadiums because they're women. Very fundamental things. Dr. Kumar, would you like to add something on that?
Well, I think it's very important to understand that unless there is democratic rights of women restored and also are guaranteed by the constitution as well as by the regime in terms of government, and also the institutional mechanism is developed to protect those rights. So the problem is that there are in constitution in Iran, still there are like Article 115 where constitution does not allow women, only religious and political men can become the president of Iran. That means every citizen does not have the equal right. There is discrimination between citizens and citizens. So women are less citizens than the men. Now this is really something which is totally against the spirit of democracy. That you treat women as a lesser citizen than the men, and also I find that the Article 163 of the Constitution, which really does not allow a woman to become a judge. Now, how do you call a judiciary as an independent judiciary, which will treat men and women equally, if you do not have women judges at all and you do not allow women to become judge? So I feel that the constitutional guarantee itself discriminates against women in Iran, and regime perpetuating that discrimination by justifying it and also by rationalizing it through Constitution of Iran, which is extremely shocking that world is treating Iran as democracy, and look at the way this is supposed to be the democracy, which is discriminating women in the fundamentals of democracy itself.
Right. So what's your, because the second point of the 10-point plan is equality before the law, which you have pointed out some of the points. In the second point, there's, just like you said, it says women must enjoy protection of the law equal to men. Women must have equal rights as men before courts. And also, I wanted to ask you about your idea as to, in the 10-point plan, the second plan says the legal age for girls shall be 18. And prior to this age, girls should not be subject to criminal punishment, and the legal age has to be set to 18. But right now, the legal age is 9. What would you say about that?
This is not only a violation of Child Rights Convention, which has been globally accepted by almost every country of the world, that, violation. 9 years is a child, below 18. 18 is the age when a person becomes adult. Below 18, it is the child. And if you are punishing the child with 10 days of imprisonment, a 9-year-old, or 74 lashes, as it is described in the punishment framework of the Article 638 of Islamic Punishment Act, which is totally shocking. I think this is really a brutality. This is really, putting children through all kinds of violence, which is totally not acceptable. So this is another thing which is really, and I think Mrs. Rajavi's 10 points really focuses on this point, because equality before law, again, I will say rule of law is one of the fundamentals of democracy. If you do not have rule of law, and and everybody is not equal before the law, then certainly this is no democracy. What I'm trying to say is that in the name of saying that we are having election and somebody getting elected and then running the country in a most undemocratic, most the way that the discrimination between men and women, it is not acceptable. I think in accordance with the Iranian regime's law, a woman's testimony in the court has half the weight as a men's testimony. Now, this is something which is unheard of, unacceptable. How can you have women, presenting women's testimony, you do not treat as the full testimony, whereas men can? That means there is going to be never justice for women. They are not equal before the law. So if they are not equal, every citizen is not equal before the law, then there is no rule of law. And if there is no rule of law, there is no good governance and there is no democracy.
For example, we have the case of, I'm sure both of you remember, we have the case of Reyhan Jabbar, the 26-year-old girl who was executed after 7 years of prison.
Young designer,
Yeah.
yes, young designer, yes.
She defended herself to rape, but because she was a victim of violence, and then because she's a woman and because she has no laws, after 7 years she's executed. And this is under Rouhani. This is under the new president, where the world calls a moderate, but this is, inequality before the law. This is a very good example because I think the world tried to, pressure the regime to stop this execution, this young girl, but the Iranian regime does not listen.
Yes, and as I know from the data that since this president has come to and took office, 70 women have been executed by now by this regime. Now, what kind of, how can you really have death penalty when the globally people are abolishing death penalty? Every democratic country is discussing, and also less and less death penalty, especially to women. It's really not heard of that women have been put through the gallows in the way 70 women have been killed by the current regime.
Actually, I just wanted to ask you, we had a question right now coming in from someone who sent us a message on our Twitter asking us, is there executions of women still going on in Iran? And I think you answered very well. I'll just add to that. Since the new president, the so-called moderate, has taken over, there have been over 2,300 executions, and among which 70 were women. And so nothing has changed, and the rate of executions has been the highest of any of the president until now. So that was a question that we answered. Now let's go to the third point, which is freedom of choosing one's own clothing. And I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, this was one of the first laws that was instated. But in the 10-point plan, it says women are free to choose their own clothing. Government interference in this regard is prohibited, and the law of forced veiling shall be repealed. I wanted to ask each of you what what you think. I mean, is this right, or should the forced veiling be instated? Ms. Culi, what do you think?
Yeah, of course, that it is a violation of human rights, because everybody must be free to decide its own clothing, and so this is not only a mentality or a religious rule or a tradition. It is an instrument, this pressure, not to become women free, because if more rules you put, then more under pressure you put women, more afraid you make them, more social control you exercise on them. So this is it is very thought. It's not something that it is because of a tradition, Right. So it is very dangerous. The lack of freedom begins like this.
Yes.
That is my idea, and it has happened in many ways in many countries. So It's not a new thing. Yeah.
Dr. Kumar, do you have anything to add on that, on freedom of clothing?
I think this is just the fundamental right of every human being, every individual, to decide about what they want to wear, what they want to eat, what kind of education they want to have. It is not for the regime to decide.
Exactly.
But I have heard that if they have seen women without veil covering their head, then acid has been thrown on women.
Yes,
have been publicly penalized, punished, and also that their faces have been deformed by throwing acid. Now, this is really extreme form of cruelty, because if women are not allowed to choose what they want to wear and what they want to, that means that you're violating the fundamental rights of women as a citizen of a nation, and also that you are, by throwing acid, there's extreme form of cruelty and violence against such women, which is intolerable, which is unacceptable. And I'm sure global women are listening to our conversation, and there has to be pressure put on the Iranian regime that this is totally something which is cruel. This is something which is unacceptable and also violates the rights of women.
Okay, I just have another question that came in from Sarah. She asked me about what is the idea of the 7,000 police forces, the undercover police forces that have been instated in Tehran to control the veilment of women. I'll answer to that. In mid-April, there was a new news coming out of Iran where there have been 7,000 undercover police only in Tehran, and the responsibility was to monitor the malvealing of women in the streets, in their cars, and in their private lives. And so this is only in one city in Tehran where 7,000 private agents are there to control, the women and what they wear, how they choose to, to be. And in the last 2 months, there have been 1,333 cars that have been impounded because of women who were in the car with improper veiling, or they were driving with, a little bit of, improperly veiled. So, and this is only in one province. And these are just two examples of how the regime is stepping up its pressure on women at this time. So we'll go to the fourth point, which is equal participation in political leadership. And it says, women shall enjoy the right to participate in the formulation of government policy and the implementation thereof, and to hold public office and perform all public functions at all levels of the government. And also, women must specifically enjoy the right to equal participation in the country's political leadership. And any laws that cause prohibition and limitation is just unacceptable. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kumari, is there anything that you'd like to add on the presence and the importance of women in political leadership?
I think basically democracy gives equal right to every citizen to right to vote, as well as right to get elected to the office. This is the right of every citizen, and also, of course, if you are of a certain age, there are countries where you can be, putting your nomination when you're 21-year-old or you're 25-year-old. But there is nothing like a man can do it and a woman cannot do it. That kind of a discrimination is not there. But if Iranian constitution has Article 115, where you cannot allow a woman to get elected to the highest office. Now, what is the basis of such a discrimination? When globally there is a movement for 50-50 gender balance.
Exactly.
In 2015, I think Canadian Prime Minister, when he became the Prime Minister, a journalist asked him a question: why do you have 50% women in your parliament, in your cabinet? He laughed and he said, what are you talking? Is it 2015 or are you talking about the 16th century feudal? This is modern era. They're everywhere. Political rights. And also, what is important is that a lot of the development happens when more women are in education, when women's health is protected, when children get the nutrition, when you have more women who are not facing violence against them, when they have freedom and liberty to choose the job and the education they want to do. So all that is possible only when women are participating in policy making processes.
Exactly.
If women are discriminating against policy making processes, then they are not able to do that. And I think this is something which is going to be very, very difficult for Iranian regime, and especially in the regime of Rouhani, that, how do you really explain to the world that this is a democracy where you're discriminating against women and keeping them out of the elected office and also keeping out of the policy making bodies?
Yes, I wanted to because we have a question that came in from somebody who just asked us about the recent elections in Iran. I wanted just to add something to that. Okay, so in the 10 rounds of elections in Iran since 1979, I mean, in the last 38 years, there have been 95 women altogether in the 10 rounds of...
Only 95 women?
Only 95 women. And these 95 women are, of course, they're funneled through, the Guardian Council. So they have to be completely, they have to be completely in favor of the supreme leader. And in this recent election, out of 1,126 women who had, nominated themselves for parliament, 1,100 were eliminated. They weren't accepted. Only 26 women were accepted to have, the legitimacy and the faithfulness to this supreme leader. So out of the 26, 17 women have been accepted to parliament, and now people are saying this is a breakthrough for the regime. But when you look at it in overall, scope, you see out of the 37 years since 1979, since 1980, where the parliament's open, 3.27% of members of parliament were women. So it's almost nothing.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's just what I wanted to answer to that question that had come in, because maybe people were asking what,
So Elham, what about the local bodies? If that is the condition of the national parliament, when you have not more than 3% women, 3.27 only for statistical, actually it is 3% when you look at the overall. So if you don't have the women in the, higher levels in parliament, then what about the local bodies? Do you think women ever will get any chance to be able to participate in the local body?
It's very rare. Women, for example, out of these 17 women, 2 of the women, there's issues about them. One, she's being questioned to be disqualified because she shook a hand of a foreigner outside of Iran, and the Guardian Council is talking to disqualify her. And another woman, they want to disqualify her because she was seen without the hijab outside of Iran. Anyway, so we're talking about the women that were funneled from the Guardian Council that have made it to this point. And so in other areas and other arenas, women are definitely more, they're more pushed, out of the political arena back, into their homes. For example, in many of the offices, for example, in the occupational area, women are officially being told, what is the need, to have women. Women, they're like the high clerics are saying the responsibility for women is to take care of the husband, is to go back into the homes and take care of the children. And so they're pushing women back. And like you mentioned, Dr. Kumari, about students or university students, 60% of university students are women. But when they come out of the society, when they come out of university to the society, they're restricted. And for example, 70 different fields are prohibited for women to study in universities. We have written a report on discrimination of obstacles of women in the employment and in education. And this is on our website. It explains all the different obstacles of women that they face. For example, like I said, the 70 different fields are found in this, or the different things that women have to, have to go through just to be able to get jobs, let alone in the political arena.
And Elham, I've also heard that women are not allowed to study law and they're not allowed to be engineers. What kind of a system where women are not allowed to become lawyers? This is something which is also quite surprising for us, because we have largest number of lawyers as women in India.
I'll answer short on that. Women are allowed to study law, but there's a lot of discrimination. They're not allowed to become judges. They can't have the decision making in the top level. In general, for example, like you mentioned, engineering, there are different parts of engineering in different universities that women cannot even enroll in. And it's in this report that we've read and that we've written. But let's go back to to the next point that we are talking about. Number 5 on the 10-point plan is equality in the economic sphere. So it says women should enjoy equal rights as men in terms of inheritance and entering, contracts and managing property, and women should have equal opportunity as men in the labor market. And I think we talked a little bit about this. If you have also, it says women must receive equal pay for equal work, and job security and benefits. If you have anything to add on that, because I think we talked about it a little right now, but if you have anything, Dr. Kumari or Ms. Culi, if not, we can go to the next point.
I think let me just mention one small thing. That is, the inheritance under the regime's law is based on the notion that the share belongs to a woman in half of what belongs to a man. I mean, this is again discrimination. It's a very serious discrimination because this economically disempowers women. This ratio appears in all the mullahs' civil laws regarding inheritance rights. And also, the other issue is about 12% women are in active labor force, whereas women go to universities, as you said, almost 60% women. So really, a lot of this whole national resource, because so many educated women are not allowed to do anything. So this national resource is not being used for development, but is going waste.
Right. You are right. That's how it is. I mean, 12% activity of women, whereas, the 60% university students are women and girls. Ms. Culi, do you have anything to add, or should we go on?
No, I think you analyzed very well, and Dr. Kumari also. So just to add a line that if the women are economically stronger, then the situation changes. So for that, they create situations very, very difficult on it. Okay, let's pass in the other point.
Yes. So the 6th point is equality in the family. Equality in the family. Like we said, women must have free and equal right to choose and marry, divorce a spouse, and they shall have equal rights to obtain custody of the children. And then marriage has to be marriage before legal age, reaching legal age is prohibited. Ms. Culi, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, it is really very shocking to see the testimonies that in Iran is happening on these issues. Just to see that how the little girls are pushed to be married, or the mass wedding ceremonies. All these things that happen there are really that make us very upset on this situation. And because it is really to destroy the life of women. And I think even the divorce is something that it is instrumentalized on, so for men to have more women, or just to change their marriages, etc. So this is really very dangerous, because it makes women weaker in their life.
Exactly.
And so it's very, very, so I hope that women and families are fighting against this. I know that it's very difficult, but it's really a very dangerous phenomenon.
Right.
And also, Elham, just one line I want to add is that forced marriages and child marriages prohibited under UN Convention, United Nations Convention. Again, I'm mentioning every time because a lot of countries are signatory to these conventions, and Iran is not. Because Iran is practicing all this, and these forced marriages are really seen as cruelty against children. It is violation of child's right, and also it is, and also forcing children into sexual slavery. Because when they're too small, too young, and they're not able to decide who they want to marry, or they're not able to decide what age they should get married, then these girls are pushed into sexual slavery.
Right. Yes, exactly. So we have another question in from Twitter about political prisoners and prisoners of conscience. They've asked, do we know the exact number of women who have been arrested? I just wanted to add to this. We don't have the exact numbers, but we have written a report just recently on political prisoners in Iran, the female political prisoners, and the conditions of women's prisons and the discriminations that they face as prisoners. And I'm sure we have a clip that we wanted to show right now. I don't know if you'll see it, but it's about Atena Faraghdani. She was an artist who drew a picture, a character of the Iranian regime's, the heads of the government as animals, depicting them like as cows and as pigs. And then she was charged for propaganda, and she was taken to prison. And due to the international campaign that we have worked and around the world, people have very actively worked to free her. She was just released a few days ago, and we wanted to show this clip. If you could just, we could watch it together.
We do not jail people for their opinions.
زیاد نمیتونه اعتراضی باشه، زیاد نمیتونه مهم باشه. خیلی هم متاسفانه جا افتاده توی کشورمون یا خیلی جاهای دیگه که هنر شاید خیلی مهم نباشه، ولی کار هنرمند، هدف هنرمند اینه که به چالش بکشه و به چالش کشیده بشه. بعضی وقتا وقتی که به چالش کشیده میشه ممکنه بهاش خیلی سنگین باشه، ممکنه زندان باشه و ممکنه خیلی چیزای دیگه باشه، ولی یادمون نره که رسالت داره، هر هنرمند رسالت داره.
Until whenever the clip is there. So the seventh point, just also before I go to the seventh point, in Women's Day conference this year that we held in Paris, Mrs. Rajavi pointed out very well in her speech about the discriminations against women, particularly pointing out to the issues of the history of Iranian women's struggle in the past 37 years, where out of 120,000 people who were executed from our movement, 30% were women, and girls as young as 13 were executed for their right to freedom and democracy, or even pregnant women. And I just wanted to just also refer to that because it was a very, very interesting, very, very, very interesting speech that spoke about the misogynist laws of this regime and how they have used the name of religion. And on the other side, we strongly believe in individual, rights of people. People should be able to, to live in freedom and democracy. So let's go to the seventh point, which is prohibition of violence, which points to the death penalty against women shall be annulled. The death penalty shall be annulled, and torture, offensive, and degrading treatment of women shall be prohibited. Rape shall be considered a crime wherever it occurs, and various forms of violence against women, acts of intimidation or forcible deprivation of their freedoms shall be considered crimes. We've talked a lot about the death penalty and also rape, and we've given examples. Do you have anything to add to this, Dr. Kumari? Would you like to add anything to this one?
Yes, I think you did give example of Rihanna Jabari, and
Yes.
you know that she was raped and she was in fact executed. So instead of getting justice, instead of getting any kind of support from the regime for having and the guilty was not punished. Instead, the woman herself was penalized. So what kind of a justice system is this? I mean, this is totally not justice. This is reverse justice. In fact, it is injustice that instead of getting a law which protects women against this, where you are not, and also execution of women. And I said that globally there is debate to go do away with capitalist punishment, and so many people have been executed in Iran. Now this is really looks like a very primitive regime, where also the regime which always takes the cover of the religion, which is totally unacceptable, because they are themselves being so misogynistic, they are being so patriarchal, and also then trying to protect themselves by taking the shelter of the religion and misconfusing the people of Iran, and they are justifying themselves by using the pretensions and pretext of the religion.
Right. Ms. Culi, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with Dr. Kumari's words, and of course that this is a very violent regime, let's say, because it is very primitive, very violent, and it is torturing especially the women in your country.
Yes. Okay, so we'll round up the three others because we've talked about it. 8 is prohibition of sexual exploitation, which mostly is about trafficking of women, and the 9th is repelling the mullah's Sharia laws, and the 10th is social benefits. Do any of you want to add anything on these 3 last ones?
On social benefits, I would like to add something.
Yes.
Because it is absolutely necessary. The country, as everywhere, is not full of rich people that can afford high payments for the hospitals, like the case that it is shown in the story of the website for the young girl who is. It is absolutely terrific that they maintain the young girl in the hospital because she cannot pay. The payment. So this is tremendous. So I think that, but the only positive point on all this that we have discussed during this hour, it is that they are making a boomerang of it. All these very terrible rules, laws, oppressors, etc., will not last because people will not bear so long these things. It has happened in all the societies. So I hope that it will be changed, but actually it's really a very hard situation.
I think also in the context of social development goals, which have been just announced, SDGs, and the globally people are trying to move the countries towards better health for women and children. And when you look at the way the situation in Iran is, there's a lot to be done. But basically the root of all this is depriving women from policy making positions. If there were enough number of women in the parliament, at least 50%, or if not 33%, then I'm sure the parliament would have legislated differently. There would have been different schemes, programs, projects targeting especially women and children towards their health, towards their education, towards their protecting them against violence, including the law enforcement agencies, which are, you talked about the police force, which is in plain clothes or whatever they are, in fact punishing women. instead of protecting women. I mean, this is really very, very unacceptable situation where police force, which is supposed to have been trained to protect women and provide the social security, social benefits, ensure that all this reaches out to women. Anybody who is not doing it is penalized instead of women being penalized for all this.
I just want to add to something like that. The problem is that within such a regime, things are not going to change because, like I mentioned before, those people who are allowed to be members of the parliament have to be, the top faithful people, to the supreme leader, because everything. The last decision maker is the supreme leader. There's no such thing as any form of freedom in Iran. So it's very, very, it's impossible for change from within. For example, look at this new president. They call him a moderate, but he's the same. He's part of the same regime. He was actually, Rouhani was actually the one who. I have a document here. I'll show you. Rouhani was actually the one to ban the entrance of unveiled women to the workforce in the beginning of, as soon as Khomeini took over, because he had a high responsibility in the government. And when he went to governmental jobs to monitor the situation of the women's, hijabs and the veiling, he was the first, and he wrote this in his memoir, saying that he's very proud to be the first one to push for this law to be instated in the workforce for women in governmental jobs. Other than that, we have two questions that are coming in. One is asking you, our guests, why are you so involved in this idea? I mean, in this in this cause, and they want you to. What is your interest, and what would your message be to, the women of Iran?
Are you asking me, Elham, to start?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Kumari.
In India for almost 4 decades, since I have been a student fighting for the rights of women in India, any kind of violation of women's rights in India, we stand by our women. We are using every possible social media, electronic media. We are using all kinds of, mobilization techniques to reach out to women. And as a result, there has been a lot of change. We have got new laws. We have got many different kinds of projects and programs. There are direct schemes and projects and programs for women now. We have gender budgeting. We have many ideas which got institutionalized because of the struggle. My support for Iranian women, when I read the news in Indian newspapers or when I'm traveling abroad, how women have been victimized because they have not used the veil, and they throw acid on women, they rape women as punishment. The women have been executed in Iran. I think really as a women's rights person, I want to stand by Iranian women. I want to help them fight the battle whichever way I can. My commitment is for women's rights. My commitment is against patriarchy. My commitment is against any misogynistic regime. And I do see Iranian regime as a very misogynistic regime, very patriarchal regime, which is really has taken away all the rights of women of Iran. And I'm sure one day Iranian women will get up. We are all supporting as a global women's movement to Iranian women. We are all part of the global women's call for equality for women and empowerment of women. So that is why I am with Iranian women.
Bravo. And Ms. Culi?
Of course, I think that women issues are universal. So every woman problem is our problem. And I think that every voice that can be raised on support to women, Iran's women's situation, that is very hard. It is a help, it is a support, it is something that can go on. So I think that we never must leave Iranian women alone, and we must add our lines to be in this support. And as a militant as an activist of women issues, of course, I my life has to be always in the side of women, and especially in this moment on Iranian women sufferings.
Very good. You know, Mrs. Rajavi has a very, very famous a belief. She believes that women are the force for change, and
Yes.
she is an inspiration for women in Iran, really to be able to, you know, to continue this struggle. Actually, we have a question from someone who has sent us a message asking, how do you see the role of leadership of Mrs. Rajavi? Dr. Kumari, do you want to answer that?
Yes, certainly, because I have had opportunity of meeting Mrs. Rajavi. I have heard opportunity to hear her when she was speaking. I think she is one who is very passionately driven for the people of Iran. She really wants democracy to be restored in Iran. She really has, whenever I have discussed with her, I find her very genuinely committed to the issues of this 10-point agenda, as you just read out. This agenda really sums up the focus of all the global women's movement demands that how to achieve equality for women. I'm sure Iranian women are listening to her, and I think a woman leading the struggle, this is very special. This is very important, that a woman is leader of this whole struggle for restoration of rights, of democratic rights of people of Iran, and also the equality for women of Iran.
Yes. And Ms. Culi, do you want to add? Yes.
I think that if the famous phrase of Mrs. Rajavi is really very beautiful, that women are a force for change, but she personally is a force for change. And I think that the Iranian women and you, all of the movement, you are very lucky to have such a woman in the head of all, not only of women from Iran, but as Dr. Kumari said, all the country is lucky to have a woman like her in the head of the opposition and to change. And I'm sure that one day you will win.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just wanted, before we end, do you have, because you know we have members of the resistance movement who are in Camp Liberty, and a large number of these women are right now maybe listening to this, or they will definitely follow up on
Listen later.
Yeah. Do you have a message for the women in Camp Liberty, Miss Culi? Do you want to?
Don't give up. Don't give up. And because things can change. I have lived in a very hard dictatorship regime, and I never thought that my life would change or the life of our women, but it came the moment. So don't give up.
Yes. And Dr. Kumari?
Yes, let me echo the sentiments of Diana Culi, that there is never going back in history. I'm sure things will move forward, and there is going to be change, because you cannot keep people oppressed all the time. You may do it for some time, but you cannot keep people oppressed. People will fight back and will get their democratic rights, and Iranian women will get equality, especially women who are struggling in Camp Liberty.
Thank you. And so Mrs. Rajavi once said that, I mean, she said this a number of times, and she's told the Iranian regime that it will be these very women who are so repressed by this very regime and this misogyny, when they will be unlocked by this chain of tyranny, the chains of tyranny, it will be these very women who will, overthrow this regime, and who will actively, be the ones to rebuild Iran and bring democracy, peace, and freedom, for the people of Iran.
I want to add one more line. That the fundamental. Yes. I just want to assure the women in Camp Liberty that fundamentally, you look at the history, global history, yes. Fundamentalists have not survived long.
Never. Yeah.
So he will not survive.
I think the same.
Very good. So I wanted to thank both of you for joining us tonight. I think it was a very interesting discussion, and thank you very much, Dr. Kumari. It's very late in India, but you joined us, and Ms. Culi, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I thank you for the chance to be in touch, the three of us, and to work a little bit on this great cause.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Kumari. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.